What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love. I'm in Toronto where you
Welcome to episode 1413 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. And Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of the community since 1921. Today, making her Toronto Mic debut is Anne Marie Aikins. Welcome to Toronto Mic'd, Anne Marie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mike.
No hyphen required, right? Let's
No.
address this off the top. This is the burning issue of the day. I know Anne Marie's who hyphenate Anne Marie because Anne Marie is the first name, but you don't have a hyphen. Does that mean Marie is your middle name?
No, it means
Okay.
Anne Marie. Where the history behind my name is it's Catholic, and we have.
Well, I know the Catholics.
And so the Anne Marie is like a name proper, but
Okay, because
two
my mom
separate
was
words.
always called Mary Catherine. But Catherine was a middle name, but she was always referred to as Mary Catherine. And yes, that is a Catholic thing. But so you just go by Anne Marie Aikins, no hyphen required.
Yep.
Tough questions off the top, Anne Marie. Okay. Thanks for coming here today.
Oh, thank you. I've been curious about you for a very long time, and I've had friends that said, you need to get on Toronto Mic. You need to get on Toronto Mic.
Oh, is that like Chris Drew, for example?
Like Chris Drew, for example, yes.
Chris Drew's a big listener and has often said, but here's the thing, like when you were, okay, so people probably know you best as you were the chief spokesperson for Metrolinx for a very long time, right?
A very long time, yes.
And you're no longer the chief spokesperson for Metrolinx.
No, and it's going on a year now, which, boy, time sure flies because people still think I'm still there. So, but I am no longer there. No.
So my personal preference when I do these programs, I'd rather have on somebody like an Ed Keenan, for example, from the Toronto Star, and then talk about Metrolinx, like instead of the chief spokesperson, because again, you're no longer in this capacity. You now have your own communications company, and we'll talk about everything. But I would think that you would be here to you're paid to spin things for Metrolinx, and I don't see the value in talking to somebody whose job it is to blow smoke up my butt. What do you say about that?
Well, if you hired me as a chief spokesperson, I would have a couple of agreements with you right off the bat. I won't lie for you, and I won't spin for you. I would say that right off the bat. And most people would look at me and go, yeah, well, of course, I'd never ask you to do that. But inevitably, everyone would ask me to do that. And I would remind them of our agreement. I won't lie for you, and I won't spin for you.
Okay, and you still land gigs, even though you're refusing to lie and spin.
I did. I landed some gigs. I kind of accidentally got into corporate communications from journalism. So, and
okay, well,
Metrolinx wasn't the first place.
No. Okay, so give me let's do the Anne Marie Aikins bio off the top here. So how did you end up in essentially what's PR essentially, right?
Yes, it's essentially PR. It kind of was. It was first off, I'm older, so I'm like a young person, and young people today are going to have all kinds of different careers throughout their lives, but I already do that. I started out in kind of nursing/counseling, and I worked with people with disabilities and handicaps, and I moved into the rape crisis movement after I was sexually assaulted. and started a rape crisis center in my small town, and was volunteering, made that into a career. Would speak to media all the time, and I would write editorials and so forth. And I figured out that was a skill I was really good at and I really enjoyed, and moved into journalism from there and writing books. And then somebody came to me and said one day, I think you would be a good person in PR in our public service. So,
well, you proved yourself to be an effective communicator, and really the bulk of that work, being a spokesperson, would be, I would think, being a good communicator. Somebody you could put in front of a mic, will be comfortable in front of a microphone, be able to succinctly, share a message, and that was you.
And that was me. I'm a good talker. I'm a good try to be a better listener, but I can write. I have all of those skills and I was never seemed to be intimidated by a camera in front of my face or 10 questions coming at me at the same time. And that's probably from my family of origin, but I was comfortable there.
Okay, so there's an episode. Normally, I record an episode of Toronto Mic'd, and then I drop it 2 minutes later. Like, this is the norm. So after we record, we're going to take a photo in front of what Dave Thomas has anointed the Toronto tree. Okay, so we're going to get our photo. And then I would say, give me 5 minutes. Okay, I don't want to commit to 2 minutes here. But 5 minutes later, this episode will be in the Toronto Mic'd feed. But I actually recorded an episode with somebody that's hasn't hit the feed yet. This is very rare, but I didn't want to drop 2 episodes in one day because Tom Hayes was here yesterday and I didn't think it was fair to him. But I had this really interesting conversation with Pamela Wallen yesterday, which no one can hear yet, but I did have this convo. So if I, shout out to Ridley Funeral Home, and this is a theme of today's chat, I want to talk to you about cumulative grief, and I want to talk to you about death, to be honest. And we have a funeral home sponsor, so should I die, you'll never hear Pamela Wallen. That would be terrible. But I can tell you she had a similar origin story in how she ended up in journalism/media. Was a very similar origin story. So you got to check out the upcoming Pamela Wallen episode, because what you said there is very similar to what she said to me yesterday. But so is Metrolinx like prior? And again, I'm sorry that you were sexually assaulted, and it sounds like you made you created something positive from this terrible occurrence in your life. But what small town are we talking about where you started the rape crisis clinic?
Barrie, Ontario.
Barrie. Okay, that's a small town. Yeah.
Well, it was when I grew up there. Yes, it was very small and small town-ish. Still has a small town feel, and I still have roots there. And my older kids are there, so I have grandkids there. So I have affinity for Barrie still, for sure.
Barrie now, because I'm closer to your age than you probably think, and I would say that Barrie, when I was growing up, was that's where you go if you can't afford to live in Toronto. You can always get a place Get a good big home in Barrie for pretty cheap. That's long gone, right? Now you need to be a rich person to live in Barrie, Ontario.
Well, I think the difference is, so you're still going to spend a lot of big bucks to get a house, but you'll have more property. Well, there's way more single family homes and that sort of thing. So you'll have more space than perhaps in Toronto. But
you know what the most important things in real estate are, Anne Marie?
What?
It's location.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And all the cops moved up there, by the way, and they still are. Oh, there's most of you ask the Toronto cops how many live up in Barrie. There's a lot.
Okay, you're full of good info here. Okay, so Metrolinx is when I first discovered you, and it's funny you were curious about me. I was curious about you. I was looking for a reason to get you over here just so I could kind of meet you, and the reason I got, and this is a teaser for what's to come, you wrote this piece for the Toronto Star. And I found it to be very interesting. And I've always been interested in death and grieving and how everybody grieves. So I wanted to meet you. You wrote this piece for the Star in late 2023 that I would call the catalyst for me extending the invitation. So we will be diving into that, if that's cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
But prior, again, so I can't beat you up over the Metrolinx Eglinton LRT project. Unfortunately, I'm too late to do that. But I am going to ask you your feedback on something that I was reading about in Spacing yesterday. Shout out to the good people at Spacing. But first I'm going to tell you, so your last name's Aikins. Mm-hmm. I'm sure no relation, but but I was a big Blue Jays fan in 84, 85. And I remember we had a great first baseman named Willie Upshaw. And I loved Willie Upshaw. And I can hear Murray Eldon saying, Willie Upshaw's name right now in my head. But there was another Blue Jay, didn't play a lot, but he was a part of my team when I was like 9, 10 years old. And so I love the guy. Willie Aikins. Do you have any memory of the Willie Aikins on the Toronto Blue Jays?
I do, but unfortunately, no relation to me.
No relation to Willie
think
Aikins.
They might have spelled their name differently.
Aikens.
Yeah, see, I'm an INS.
Okay, you know what? I didn't do my proper homework. Okay, so what I found interesting about Willie Aikins is he had very serious addiction issues, like throughout his career, cocaine primarily, and then because of his addiction to cocaine, he ended up spending quite a bit of time in jail. And I always found Willie Aikins to be a very interesting example of how we, punish people for addiction issues. Like today, I think we're far more enlightened. I'm not sure how much more enlightened they are back down in the States where he was spending his jail time. But like we would now, I feel like jail is not the solution for somebody with, an addiction to cocaine like Willie Aikins had. He had a mental health problem there that needed to be treated. But Willie Aikins did play for my Blue Jays in 84 and 85, but he spells his name a little bit differently.
He does, yeah. We I think ours came from is an Irish background, and they spelled it INS.
Okay, can I play a song for you?
You can.
All right, so this fantastic song I'm playing is called Tougher Than You. Do you have any idea who's singing this song?
Well, that happens to be my goddaughter, Carly Aikins, who is a rising star and incredibly talented, and I love that song.
Okay, so when I said, Anne Marie Aikins is making her Toronto Mike debut, Greg wrote in, and so your goddaughter is also your niece, right?
Yes, she's my niece.
So it's like, yeah, her niece, Carly Aikins, is an awesome singer, and I did a little, YouTube searching and started listening. Greg, I agree with you. Carly's fantastic.
Yeah, she sounds got a little bit of Janis Joplin in her, which is really like, and she's got that grit, just like Janis, and I just have always loved her. She's beautiful, too.
Complete package here, Anne Marie.
Yeah.
Okay, so and the Aikins family is quite large, right?
It's quite large. 11 siblings, and grew up, as I said, Catholic. We were all very, very close together. My father was a doctor. He was like pretty famous doctor in Barrie, and especially women would say to me, "He used to be my doctor. I love him." And I'd say, "Oh, you tried to get on the birth control pill, didn't you?"
Okay, yeah, that's where you went. What was your dad's name?
It was Dr. Joe Aikins, and people called him Dr. Joe, but he would not prescribe the birth control pill.
No, because he was too Catholic.
Yeah, he would refer, but yes.
Okay, he would refer. Okay, that's wild too. I mean, I was raised Catholic, so I feel like I speak to this, but the whole idea that like we were taught abstinence is wild to me. Like, I think that's wild. Okay. So.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you're one of 11. You have 11. Sorry, you're one of 12 children.
11.
So 11 in total. You're one of those. Okay, so you're 10 plus you. Okay, now that's a little teaser. Again, we're going to get into cumulative grief, but can I play something for you that I was reading about in Spacing magazine yesterday, and it ties into your old gig. So I know, again, I'm going to say this very clearly. Anne Marie Aikins is the former, that's an important word, chief spokesperson for Metrolinx, the provincial transit agency. You now operate your own communications company, right?
Yes.
And what's it called?
It's just called Anne Marie Aikins Communications, or Emma Communications, because people know me by my initials as well.
Emma. And how is that going for you? Because it's been over a year, you said?
It has, and I did right away. People started calling me just to help them with their media relations and their issue management, and I give the same advice to them too. If you want somebody that's going to be reactive rather than proactive and spin for you, that I'm not your person.
You're not gonna do the spin doctoring for anybody. Okay, yeah. So this is an ad that's I'm told by spacing, because I don't get to the theater much anymore, but I'm told it airs like before you see a movie. You go to the Cineplex, and then they do the ad block before the trailer block. And I'm going to just play it for you. It's only 30 seconds. There might be a couple of these.
Ugh, this Metrolinx construction is killing me.
I know, right? All for more transit and fewer cars, helping you breathe cleaner air and live a healthier life. It's killing you.
That's one.
Another Metrolinx detour. So dumb.
Yeah, just to build more transit so we can get to more dumb places like, the movies, hockey, Mike's basement, your house, karate class, your grandma's house.
Okay, so have you heard these before?
No, and is it your basement they're referring to, Mike? Do I need to crack open one of these beers first?
Listen, I didn't. It's 10 o'clock, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere. This is what I learned. And if you want a beer, you let me know. I'll get you a cold one from the fridge. But on that note, you will be taking home with you some fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery.
Nice.
So, okay, so again, you don't speak on behalf of Metrolinx anymore. You are now what do I call you? Like a civilian.
I'm a civilian now, yes.
But how many years did you spend in that role?
11.
11. Okay. So if I got you a couple years ago. So these ads are airing in movies. And the point of the spacing article was that like in this theater, people were like yelling at the screen and booing it and how condescending it was. And it really, apparently, according to the author of this piece in spacing, it was pissing people off. And I never heard it because I don't get to the theater much, but then I listened to it because it's on YouTube and I just played it for you right there. And yeah, I can see that bugging people, that approach. What are your thoughts? What can you say? I know you won't lie to me. Anne Marie, I know you're going to tell me the truth. What do you think of that campaign, that these ads that are now airing at movie theaters in Toronto? Well,
I can only make an assumption because when you can't see the visual of what's accompanying it visually, but I have a feeling what they're trying to convey is they're trying to perhaps acknowledge that the construction is a pain in the ass. They're probably trying to acknowledge that it's going to be here for a while, but then in the end it'll be worth it.
Well,
maybe
clearly they're like, okay, yeah, this sucks. I mean, the jokes I've been hearing about and again, I usually talk about this with Ed Keenan from the Toronto Star, but whoever's in my basement, Matt Elliott, whoever's here, we might talk about the Eglinton LRT project, the Young Eglinton station, and the jokes we would make about. I listen to CBC radio, and it's been how many years? It's been so delayed that people just make jokes about it. And that ad is a bit condescending in that it again, and you don't speak for the agency anymore. But I just figured, coincidentally, I read that yesterday, and you were coming over today, so it's one of those perfect timing things to get your take on it. But it's just teenagers, like cool teenagers having this chat, like this sucks. Yeah, but like it's for such good, like, it's, and to me, it's like, as I'm going to just quote the article, in the year before the pandemic descended upon us, I experienced significant, actually, that's your article. Okay, so that's not your article. That's coming up soon. That's a teaser too. But maybe a little condescending considering the delays and what's happening with Metrolinx in 2024. Maybe.
I think people are so frustrated by construction, including me. And so fed up kind of with the delays of everything that I don't think anything would work. You can't really convince them just until you open it.
Right. Okay. So let me know if you've seen these ads in theaters. Let me know what your reaction was to these ads.
Now I want to go to the theater just to check it out.
Save your money. Go to YouTube. It's free.
Okay. No, but I want to experience what other people are feeling.
Right. You want to when people throw their popcorn at the screen because this condescending tone of the Metrolinx
I'll have to wear
ad.
sunglasses and a hat maybe.
And then you can remind people, I'm the former spokesperson. Just emphasize the word former. Okay. So I realize I really want to talk to you about cumulative grief. But I'm going to drain the swamp on all the corporate media relations, PR type questions that came in when I announced you were coming on. So we're going to do that now.
Okay.
Then I'm going to thank some partners and give you some gifts for being here. And then we're going to talk about death and grief and cumulative grief, which you so eloquently wrote about in the Toronto Star. So Blair wrote in when I said Anne Marie Aikins is coming on, and Blair wrote, these are the tough questions now. You ready? How has the role of corporate media relations changed over the years, specifically with the advent of the 24-hour news cycle and social media? Has the role become easier or more difficult?
That's a good question because it has changed a lot from when I first went into corporate communications. Was probably 16, 17 years ago now. It didn't exist. And I remember when I was at Public Health, Twitter became a thing. And we were facing the H1N1, which we thought was the biggest pandemic we were ever going to experience.
Is that the avian? No, that's different than the
something
avian.
like that, yeah.
Okay. Yes, go on.
But it was like that, and we were going to have to do a mass vaccination program and so forth. So we, and I saw Twitter, and I thought that could be just another way, because no one wanted to get the vaccination. No one. Until a 12-year-old hockey player died. And then everybody wanted to get the vaccination. So it was a way to communicate. But then as it kept evolving, and you didn't have time anymore at all. You didn't have time to plan messages, think about your answers. You didn't have time.
Right.
Everything got ahead of you unless you were really on the ball. You had to be on the ball. You had to have eyes everywhere. You had to plan ahead and think what's going to be an issue tomorrow and the next day and the next week and what's coming. In order to be ready for it, you had to be really on your game. And it really did change. And if you didn't adapt to that, you were left behind and you weren't going to do a good job.
Interesting. And Blair has a second question, which is how has the proliferation of fake news and misinformation affected the role of a media relations person in regards to ensuring that the correct message is received and perceived correctly? These are good questions from Blair.
Yeah, very good questions.
All right, Blair, way to go, buddy.
It kind of filters into just exactly what we were just talking about you have to be ahead of the game. You have to be able to figure out when someone tweets out something it seems to be always Twitter these days, something fake and something, being able to determine quickly if it is fake and then getting all over it. And I think that's what people are afraid to do. I would talk to the media, even when I had no idea really what was going on. They'd call me at 4:45 to say, what's this accident all about? And I'd quickly look at my phone and just talk to them about what I knew so far, which was often very limited. But I wasn't afraid to not have all the answers. And I think that's what people are often afraid of. What if I don't have all the answers? Right. What if I'm not prepared for it? What if they ask me something I don't know?
Well, I guess it's okay to not we're looking into that. I don't know at this point. Like that's if that's the truth, then that's better than making something up.
Well, that's exactly what I think people think. I have to have an answer, so I'll just make something up. Where I was not afraid to say, I have no idea.
Right.
I have no idea, and I'm gonna look into it, and I'm gonna get back to you, and I'm gonna tell you what it is when I find it out.
Okay, great. Now, we mentioned Chris Drew earlier because for years, Chris Drew has said I should have Anne Marie Aikins on. And again, it's no disrespect. I've been monitoring you, from afar. Ooh. And I was like, one day I do want to meet this woman and have a chat with her. I was just looking for that hook, and I didn't want it to be, let's talk about Metrolinx, only because even though you claim you don't spin and you do not lie, I believe that you do not lie, you are not an object, like you're not objective. So.
Exactly. Yeah, no, not exactly. I know they're all my friends there, and they're all the people that I love and care about are still there. Sure. So yeah, no, I'm not objective. I'll be the first to say that.
Similarly, I've never been particularly interested in talking to an active politician. I have made some exceptions lately, but it's like, okay, they're trying to get elected, so they've got their talking points, and they definitely, I won't claim that they're lying, but they definitely have spin on topics, etc. Like I just don't have a very strong appetite for bullshit, Anne Marie. So again, not that you would bullshit me, but anyway, now you're here,
I get you.
And Chris Drew can ask his questions. You ready?
All right.
The Drew family of the great city of Brampton, which, as FOTMers know, has a connection to the beloved spirit of radio. That's CFOY, everybody. By the way, David Marsden's birthday is early March, and he has asked if he could return for his birthday in early March. So, of course, I said yes, because David Marsden is an important figure in the spirit of radio, maybe the most important figure. So I'm just going to let the listenership know that Mars Bar will return to Toronto Mike. He's been here before, but it's been many years, so that's kind of exciting. Isn't that exciting, Anne Marie?
Yes, that's very exciting.
Thank you. Okay. Here are Chris Drew's questions. What are some of Anne Marie Aikins' favorite or funny lost and found stories from when she was at Metrolinx?
The Lost and Found story was one I would do every year. I would go and tour the Lost and Found, and or sometimes they would call me to say, "You got to come and see this article," because to pick one is really tough. The gold grill, the mouth grill.
Yeah,
that was funny.
Do they call that crunk or something? Isn't it crunk?
Yeah, it was like it was a lovely case, velvet case, and everything. And somebody finally came and got it, but claimed it. Somebody left their urn.
Oh,
so somebody
shout
with
out to Ridley
ashes in
Funeral
it.
Home. Yeah,
I know there was an urn, and I thought you went to all the trouble, and then you leave it on and then you don't claim it. Like geez.
Yeah.
Things like that. People, you always knew when the sex show was on because of the empty packages left behind.
Oh, the dildos?
Yeah. They always knew when Comic-Con was on because of the masks that were left behind. So there was always, it was a marker and it was a reflection always because as I said to start, I'm very curious nature, and you would get things and you'd think, what's the story behind this?
Right.
Yeah.
But that is a podcast unto itself. Like those types of missing items, when they are finally claimed, a conversation with the person about like what it is, what it means to them, why it took them so long to reclaim it, and how they feel now that they have it back. Like that to me is that's a human interest story right there.
Yeah, I did once a child that was getting chemotherapy would take the train, and she had a comfort bear, and she left her comfort bear. We went to we all, but I just couldn't let it go until we got that bear back to her.
No, that is that's essential right there. Absolutely. Okay, one more, maybe two more Chris Drew questions, since he waited so many years for this moment, Anne Marie. So, Chris Drew, by the way, I hope you come out to TMLX 15. You too, Anne Marie. It's June 27. 2024 at Great Lakes Brewery in Southern Etobicoke from 6 to 9 p.m. Not only Anne Marie and you, Chris, will you get a free fresh craft beer from Great Lakes, but Palma Pasta are going to feed you. You're going to love it. Delicious, authentic Italian food. Do you like Italian food, Anne Marie?
I love Italian food, and that pasta was one of my brother Paul's, who lived not far from here. My late brother Paul, he got that lasagna one time.
Well, I'm going to be asking you more questions about Paul in the second half of this Toronto Mike debut of yours. We're going to learn more about Paul, and that's going to tie into the cumulative grief story I want to chat with you about. But Palma Pasta does have a large lasagna in my freezer upstairs that you're taking home with you, Anne Marie. Delicious, authentic Italian pasta. Okay, so everyone come to TMLX 15 on June 27. How do you stay calm and focused? I feel like these are like PR questions. Did you write these, Anne Marie? Do you write questions and send them to Chris Drew and say, Chris, send these in so it doesn't look like I'm writing these? Okay.
No.
How do you... You wouldn't lie to me. I already know.
No, I know.
Okay. How do you stay... This is sort of like The Simpsons. Remember when Mr. Burns was running and the three... Like, you have your campaign as the momentum of a runaway freight train. How do you stay calm and focused during an emergency or a stressful situation, given the size and complexity of Metrolinx? And how can FOTMers apply those lessons in our own lives? Wow.
Well, I have been known. I was one of those people that people looked to lead them when we were in crisis, when something really super bad had happened. And I go back to my family of origin. I learned it. I was one of the oldest girls with 6 younger brothers and then more kids, 2 of which were disabled. And we were always in crisis and things were crazy and chaotic. And I learned that skill on how to stay calm and lead people during a crisis. That's a skill not everybody has. Some people are the doers. Everybody has a role, but some people are, I would, my staff, I would go, I could tell they just would look at you, tell me what to do, and I'm going to do it. That kind of, during a crisis. So,
Right.
and then I process it afterwards. I learned that you really needed to process it.
Great questions, Chris Drew. There's one more here from Chris Drew. What are some of your favorite stories when young transit fans contacted you and you were able to help them? It sounds like this might be the boy going through the chemo who lost his teddy bear or whatnot. But you have a story about young transit fans who lost something, or maybe were lost. I'm trying to. Maybe you can interpret it as you wish.
We had it all. When you're in a public transit system, it's really a reflection of everything that's in your in the world and in the community. And there were lost children, lost dogs, but the children, they often, parents would, they might just be a boy or girl that has a real interest in transit, and I loved giving them tours and behind the scenes kind of things. And the conductors of trains were really just generous and would take them, into the cabin and so forth. So, but we had many that were this in palliative care, and this was their last wish, and so fulfilled that all the time. That's
heavy stuff.
It was heavy stuff, but it felt like a privilege that I could do that, and it was just so easy to do. And the staff were really super generous with their time, and then I follow them and keep in touch with them and keep in touch with their parents and so forth, and that was always a very special thing.
All right, here's a question for me. I'm thinking on the fly here, but do you think, if you've heard episodes of Toronto Mic'd?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Do you have a favorite?
Oh, it's always the last one I listened to, which was Tom
Tom
Hayes.
Hayes.
I loved listening to Tom.
Tom Hayes here yesterday.
him.
Amazing. And it's funny because tomorrow Austin Delaney comes over, and I feel like the Tom Hayes, you're like the meat in the the CFTO sandwich here.
And I love Austin as well.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let him know. Now, do you think I'd be a good media relations person?
I do, and that you like to talk, but then somebody would have to kick you under the table to say, "Stop talking now, Tom." Mike, stop talking.
Well, I will say, if you heard the recent Dave Thomas and Ian Thomas episode,
Yes.
I really did try to stay out of their way. I think there's long periods of time where you don't even hear my voice. I'm like,
Yes,
let these
I did
bros,
notice
so,
that.
No kick
they're
required.
chattered.
I'll know when to shut up. Now, funny little note here on the live stream, because we're live at live.torontomike.com. Jeremy Hopkins writes, he goes, shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. I'll be dead when the current Metrolinx construction projects are completed. So that's in the old job, you'd have to respond to that, but I guess you can just laugh now here. Why did you leave Metrolinx?
It was a accumulation of a lot of different things. One is I had been through hell, and that was during the pandemic, and trying to recover from the cumulative grief that we're going to talk about. And every this is no criticism of anyone, but every government, and I've worked under them all, worked under the NDP, I've worked under the Liberals. I never worked directly in government, but I work for them in their agencies. So, because I was a public servant for so many years, they all have different directions on what they want to do, and then you have to figure out, can I work with a new direction? And it was just the right timing. I needed time off. It was going in a direction that perhaps wasn't going to work for me, and that's why I decided that was the right time for me to move on.
So you didn't get a tap on the shoulder. You basically pieced out.
Yeah, no tap on the shoulder.
Okay, that's important. We don't bullshit on the show. Okay, no tap on the shoulder for Anne Marie Aikins. Okay, let's talk. Actually, let me first tell you about recyclemyelectronics.ca, because Anne Marie, if you have a drawer full of old cables that will never fit any modern device, like I bet you a lot of people have these old cables they've been holding on to for 20 years, or you have the old devices like, this is my BlackBerry that like will never function again, and you have a drawer full of these old electronics. Don't throw that in the garbage. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca and you put in your postal code, and it's like, yeah, a couple of blocks away, we have an EPRA accredited depot. You drop it off, and it gets safely recycled so the chemicals do not end up in our landfill. So recyclemyelectronics.ca. And now that you're working for yourself, you may wish to subscribe to a podcast that will offer some sound financial advice. And I recommend the Advantaged Investor podcast from Raymond James Canada. It provides valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. You can hear industry specialists. They share resourceful insights on economic events, longevity, and retirement planning, growing your financial legacy. Are you planning any retirement? Like, at some point, do you want to just shut it down and I don't know what your activity of choice is, golf or bike or ski? Like, are you thinking, one day I'm just going to shut it down?
No, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. I had trouble taking a sick day, let alone going on retirement. So unless I was a really rich person, which I'm not, and could travel like 3/4 of the year as an activity, because that's about the only activity I like, that would I need to work. So
there's no thoughts of retirement at this point.
No.
Okay, but regardless, the Advantaged Investor podcast is a podcast you should subscribe to, hosted by Chris Cooksey. Thank you, Raymond James Canada, for supporting this show. And then to segue to our conversation, because we're going to change the tone here for a bit, we're going to have far fewer Metrolinx jokes. We won't, and now we're going to get very serious, Anne Marie. So you wrote a piece for The Star about cumulative grief. This segment is brought to you by Ridley Funeral Home, and they did send over a measuring tape for you, Anne Marie.
I like it.
So you can, you never know if you have to measure something. You never know. Insert joke here. Okay, that's the last joke. Now we get serious. So you mentioned you were one of 11 children, 10 plus you. Maybe we start in 2018, and maybe, if you don't mind, let's hear your voice, and let's talk about your sister, Kathy, and maybe share the story that you wrote about in the Toronto Star and how cumulative grief is a thing. Everyone mourns in their own way. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I think a lot about death. I don't know if I think more than the average person, but I think about death a lot. I think about, how people grieve. I have a podcast I co-host with Brad Jones from Ridley Funeral Home called Life's Undertaking, and we have this conversation like regularly. He's here tomorrow afternoon to record a new episode. It's probably going to come up. But tell me about your sister, Kathy.
Well, Kathy was, I was third eldest, and she was just a year older than me. And she was born with a complex form of epilepsy, one hard to treat. And then it became apparent as she got a little older that she was somehow different, and it eventually got a complex diagnosis of schizophrenia, psychotic episodes she had. It was very, very, very challenging. But she was really smart in one areas and could not understand the concepts in other areas. So she was a challenge. She was always in an emotional distress. And we were at some points in the same class together at our school, and I was the one that tried to manage her because she would start having her difficulties.
Episodes,
yes. And boys would tease her and so forth. And I could somehow get her calmed to a certain extent. She began being heavily medicated, and so she was then out of school. She spent years in and out of institutions, sometimes at one point was on the street, and finally settled in her 40s, kind of settled. She was heavily, heavily medicated, and still difficult to control epilepsy, or she would have grand mal seizures. So, but she had built a life for herself. She loved going to Tim Hortons 3 times a day. She just, she had built a life for herself.
Routine,
that
right?
It was a routine in a kind of sheltered type environment, and she would come to Toronto to stay with me or stay with one of our brothers, and she thought that was a big city. So she said she had no filter and said the funniest things all the time. And and every Sunday, if she wasn't coming to visit, I would have a phone call with her, and she said the funniest. And she didn't mean them to be funny, but I would document her phone calls. Anyways, there was no hint really of any health problems, but she suddenly needed a blood transfusion one weekend, and my mom my dad had died now 20 years before, and my mom was on her own and not really, she was coping well, but she didn't cope with Kathy, never did cope with Kathy very well. And Kathy had a blood transfusion out of the blue. And when I called her, she said she didn't know why. They just gave her one, but she didn't know why. Anyways, the next morning on the Monday, she still went to Tim Hortons. And then she came back to where she lived, and she was waiting for her nurse to give her something, and she said she was going to lay down. And she laid down, and they found she was dead.
Oh, yeah.
And my mother wouldn't have an autopsy, but she had either a heart episode, or one doctor speculated perhaps she had a seizure and she died in her sleep, and I just didn't think that made sense. But
so you had your typical Sunday phone chat with her.
Mm-hmm.
So you're having that chat on a Sunday. And then she passes away the very next day.
Yeah, the next day in the morning. Yeah. So my brother called me at work. The brother that she would go over to visit her place and his place, and I just found it. I didn't have it was my first sibling to one of us to be gone, and it was shocking. I didn't understand it. My mother was freaked out, and when I went to see my mother she was a 40-year sober alcoholic, but very much had her own a lot of her own emotional issues. Sure. And I know she had a angry discussion with her on the Sunday, with Kathy on the Sunday, and then my mother succumbed into the guilt-ridden on how
that's Catholicism right there.
That's Catholicism.
I know it well.
So, and she never really recovered from Kathy's death. She was quickly hospitalized herself, and then was unable to. Before that, she was using a walker, but then she stopped. She was just not functioning at all.
Okay, so again, this is cumulative grief. So this is the death of your sister Kathy is late 2018, right? Mm-hmm. This happens, and this is your first sibling to pass, and I can only imagine my condolences to you losing Kathy so suddenly like that. And then your mother gets news. I mean, you have kids, I have kids. It's tough to even. That's like I think about death, but I never think about burying my own kids. Like,
yeah,
this is the goal is, and I think I'm on my way to successfully making this happen. Is you die first, and then your kids bury you. This is how it's going to work, right? Yeah. Okay, so, but your mom, who was already, it sounded like she was already, how old was your mom when Kathy died?
Maybe about 84.
Okay, so she's in her mid-80s there, and she gets this news, and it sounds like she deteriorates almost immediately from when I was reading your piece.
Yeah, immediately. She deteriorated both. I think she started having, like, they call them TIAs, small strokes, and it was impairing her function. Otherwise, because before that, mentally she was really annoying at times, but she was really brilliant, and she was
sharp.
She would read 2 newspapers a day. She would shop nonstop on the Home Shopping Club and order stuff online. She figured out the whole online world after my dad died.
Okay, good for her.
So
no, I mean again, I'm from a Catholic family. I need that. You mentioned your mother was a recovering alcoholic. Irish Catholic families like ours, there's a lot of alcohol. At least in my experience. Okay, I shouldn't put this on you, except you disclosed your mother was a recovering alcoholic. Do you find there's a problem with alcohol in your in the family? Is this something that I've always associated with my Irish Catholic upbringing? That they drink a lot.
It's actually, my mother was a Scottish Protestant, and she had to convert to marry my father. And her father was an alcoholic. Her grandfather was an alcoholic. So the lineage of alcoholism.
The Scots can drink too, is what you're telling me.
Yes, they can drink too. And so she replaced her alcohol. I will tell you that. She replayed with all kinds of over-the-counter stuff and behind-the-counter stuff.
Mother's Little Helper? Is that
Oh
what
my gosh.
Nick was singing about?
She had a lot of anxiety, and anyway, certainly replaced her addictions in different ways. So
did you ever see?
She never drank again.
Never drank again. But did you ever see Requiem for a Dream?
Yes.
So I always think of that movie. The actress was so wonderful in this role, but then that sound effects styling of the popping the pills and different addictions. Yeah.
So she was always very proud of the fact that she never drank again.
Never drank again.
So she would have stopped in her 40s and with all of these kids. She was still having babies, for God's sake.
Well, that's it. The Irish Catholics, there's no birth control, so 11 children is what you get. Right?
We had so many kids. The schools started doing naming contests when the Aikins would have another kid. They weren't very imaginative, weren't their names either.
Well, I'm a Michael, so I can relate. There's no creativity there. Okay, so Kathy passes away.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother does not take this news well, as you can imagine, and she is hospitalized. But please, you mentioned Paul earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to me about your brother Paul.
So Paul was one of my younger brothers, and so there was a big age gap between not a huge age gap, because the kids all came within a very short period. But I was older than him, and knew from day one that Paul was gay, but Paul didn't seem to know it. So but he didn't come out until I dragged him out, until he was about 20, and I kind of asked him and forced him, and so then it was just the two of us that knew he was gay officially.
Right.
And then he asked me to tell my parents, and which when that you think by myself to tell my parents, and it probably was a good thing, because he would not have liked my father's or my mother's reaction. That this is a long time ago too now.
But even. Again, we've come a long way, baby, but homosexuality is still regarded as a sin by the Vatican.
And it was. They eventually accepted it, fairly quickly accepted it, but it was still, yes, it was still considered a sin, and it was still considered something that would bar him from all kinds of things, Catholic things. So, but they did accept him, and he accepted his partners and that sort of thing. So, his partner that he had for 24 years, his last partner, Fred, became a member of our family for sure. So, and still is. So, and
Paul was also a much loved music teacher at the Etobicoke School of the Arts, which is very close to here.
Yeah, he was tried to, he worked he was a working actor and musical performer and so forth, and then decided he would go into teaching, and that was the first school that he worked at, and he stayed there for about 20 years. So very much loved, and was head up the music department, and his loss was huge. So, but this was his neighborhood. This was the last thing
South
he did.
Etobicoke.
The last thing he did was ride his bike on the waterfront.
Okay, I'm sure I would have liked Paul very much. Mm-hmm. Now, anyone who knows ESA, Etobicoke School of the Arts, and I know a lot of people who went there, know that the music department is essential to that school. Like, this is an arts school, and being a music teacher at that school, it's not like, you're being a music teacher at a typical school. Like, this is the Etobicoke School of the Arts. Many a great Canadian musician, I'm thinking of Emily, I'm thinking of Metric, I'm thinking of Broken Social Scene. Many of these great artists went to Etobicoke School of the Arts.
They did, yeah. I would go to his annual musical that they would put on, and we were just remained very, very close throughout our whole lives.
And you mentioned, cycling on the waterfront trail. Paul was a healthy, fit guy, right?
Very, very healthy and fit. He was beginning to think about retiring in a few years from teaching and opening up a Pilates studio, because he had built one in the basement of his the bottom level of his home, that he'd built a Pilates studio. He was very proud of it. And he had just posted a picture on Facebook or an Instagram of his little studio. And so that a morning in late May, so Kathy had died in late 2018, and this was just in May, so we're all still kind of just recovering from the shock of Kathy's sudden death, and Paul was getting ready for his partner Fred's nephew's wedding, and he said to his partner, "I'm just going to go for a bike ride first." Went for a bike ride along the waterfront, came back and said he was just going to go down to the Pilates studio. Went down to the Pilates studio, and Fred was continued to get dressed, and after his shower, and he still didn't see Paul, and Paul wasn't answering his phone, and he came down into the kitchen and realized his phone was there, goes down into the Pilates studio, and Paul was there and non-responsive. Oh. So he began doing CPR, and until
I'm so sorry. I if you need, I'm happy to go get you a glass of water, or if you need a moment. But I know this is tough to recount. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's
because it's one thing. So Kathy, tragic loss. You lost your sister, but there were health issues along the way. So maybe it doesn't blindside you the same way, even though it's shocking. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. With Paul, it was like absolutely nothing, and he, as I said, and he died in the exact place that. He had posted so the picture he posted is where he died the next morning, which is so weird. And
so did Fred phone you? Like how were you notified that Paul had passed away?
So he called. Of course, the MS was there, and they worked on him forever. And Fred had called our brother John, and there were certain things that happen when your spouse dies at home. Unexpected. I hope and pray that it wasn't anything to do with the fact that we're gay, and then they would do that for anyone. But they kept Fred then separated from him. It was becoming an investigation.
Right.
So I think his first inclination was to call. I'm sure he must have called his sisters, who were expecting them at a wedding. And but he called my brother John, who is a lawyer, and John called me. And I happened to be in Barrie at my son's restaurant, and just collapsed in the middle of the restaurant.
I can't imagine. Again, it's trite for me to say I'm sorry here, but
that's okay. So,
but thank you for sharing this.
At that point, EMS was still working on him, but it had been like an exceptionally long time. So, I spoke to my brother a few times. Was trying to tell my sons, and my grandkids were there, and so they had to skirt them off because I was just in. Right. And I was in a restaurant, so I was trying to figure out how to get out of there in the shape that I was in. So. Anyways, in all of the phone calls, I decided John decided he would get there. So he was getting there, and I decided I was getting back. I had to be here with him. And so I drove, and I'll never forget it. It was torrential rain. I just went into a zone to get here, to get safely, and went to my youngest son lives in Toronto, and went to his place and said, "You're driving. We're going to see him." I'd already told him. He did. Got behind the wheel. We went. Police were still there, and the coroner's office was there, and his sisters were there, and. A few, I think my brother John was there, and other siblings started to arrive. So I got to see Paul and be with him before they took him away. And it was still hours and hours and hours before they took him away.
Now, if there's any consolation here, I can tell you this was not because they were gay, because my Uncle Bruce died of a heart attack suddenly at 58. And I can tear up talking about it, but I went there, and the same as you described it, with the police there, and then my Aunt Maura not, being kept separate, and this whole process taking the body away. Like, I witnessed that because I was there, and so it's just a practice, a police practice.
And I get out. It's a sudden death, unexpected. A healthy man suddenly dies. It just didn't make sense. So they have to figure out if there was a reason. Everything Fred had touched, everything Paul had. There was a glass of water there. They had to take that into evidence and test it and so forth. So and to try to figure out an explanation. And then he did have an autopsy, which wasn't 100% conclusive, but it did show some sort of heart thing.
Right. Yeah, typically, it's going to end up being a heart, undiagnosed heart ailment. And how old was Paul?
Paul was 52, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. I mean, I can touch 52 from here. My goodness gracious. Yeah. So are you, like, is your mother in a mental state where she can even process this news?
So she's in the hospital at this point, and we talked about it as family. I have a sister and a brother that live in Barrie still, so we thought we were going to need a doctor right there with a shot, because she'll lose her mind. She'll just lose her mind. That's what we thought.
Right.
And then when we got there to tell her, she didn't seem to be able to absorb it. She needed to be reminded a couple of times who Paul was.
Right.
Which one is he? Which one is he? We had to put a picture
Almost
there.
a blessing in a sense, right? Like
Almost a blessing. Yeah. It wasn't like getting in past an inch worth of psyche. She wanted his picture there so she could tell. My mother was always a storyteller. If you were telling her a story of what happened, something, she would get the details, because she couldn't wait to tell her friends or whatever, and she wanted to tell the nurses. See, that son, he died.
Hearing you talk about your mom, it sounds exactly like my grandmother, and everything from the alcoholism. Although my grandmother was of Irish descent, but everything, the storytelling, just the wit and the joke telling, and then she had dementia, and then I was her power of attorney and everything, and she had dementia for many years before she passed away. But just an aside is that hearing you talk about your mom, it sounds a lot like my grandmother.
I look like her, and I do get the art of storytelling.
Well, that's how you got your gig.
I do try to be much more accurate than my mother was. My mother would embellish everything.
Like you've seen the movie Big Fish? I always think, I watch Big Fish, and I'm like, like you kind of understand these tall tales and getting the flavor and the facts, and sometimes you need to, shout out
make
to
it a better story.
Robert Lawson and
But
Randy Bachman.
I will be in an experience, and I'll think to myself, this is going to make such a good story.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah. And then you work the framing and how to tell it, and telling a good story. Telling a story properly is an art. So many people I know and love. I'm like, okay, you should have led with that. Like, don't bury the lead. It's like, no, that's an important context to tell. And the punchline is not going to pack the punch if you don't set it up with this important detail that you completely left out. Anyway, it's an art to tell a good story.
Paul had that too. Paul and I, that's one of the reasons I think we got along. We were both like our mothers, and in that.
So your mother. The news of Kathy, essentially, we talked about her deteriorating very quickly and put her in a state from which she would never, recover. But that meant that the news of Paul would never affect her the same way, because she simply didn't have the wherewithal, if you will. But your mother would die shortly thereafter. But before we talk about your mom passing away, could you tell us a little bit about Jenny?
So Paul dies, and the whole time that so I lose two siblings, but my sister Jenny was born with Down syndrome. She was the second youngest, and I was essentially the second oldest, because Kathy was in between there.
Right.
And my mother was a functioning alcoholic then, in that she was drinking heavily, especially after Jenny was born. And just was determined that she had Down syndrome. So I often looked after Jenny, and I would take her everywhere. I was so proud of her. She was so funny and lovely, and irreverent, and she knew when I got married that it was the wrong thing to do. So it tried to interrupt my wedding the entire time, and kept swearing at the priest, telling the priest to F off, and she was funny. She gave me endless stories because of her hilarity, and she was such a personality. And she did have she was born with typically Down syndrome, have born with heart defects, and years and years and years ago we did not fix their hearts, so they died in their teens. Well, we fixed Jenny's when she got older, and so she was living longer. What we didn't know was many people with Down syndrome, once they get past 40, they get Alzheimer's.
Oh.
It's a similar gene, a genetic component to it. And it's a rapidly deteriorating Alzheimer's. And when she was in her late 40s, she got it, and
she was dying.
And she was essentially dying. Now she was hospitalized, and so we knew she wasn't going to live long, and we knew my mother wasn't, because she was deteriorating.
Right.
So we were kind of preparing ourselves for those two deaths when we had two unexpected. So we had that, and then immediately in the focus of, I spent my weekends going between my mother and Jenny in hospitals. So it was.
They're both dying. Your mom and Jenny, and the term you used in the Toronto Star article that I read and said, I want to talk to Anne Marie Aikins, anticipatory grief. And this is, I mean, I don't want to bring up another movie, but is it like Groundhog Day, where you essentially every day you say goodbye to Jenny as if it's her last day?
Well, that's exactly what you would. When Alzheimer's is one way, is you start to, because they go in and out of recognizing you, first off, and that becomes really, really hard as she is not recognizing you. She used to call me, she couldn't say Anne Marie very well. She said Amelie.
It's a nice name too.
Yeah, and when she was in the nursing home, when she was now out of her really super aggressive. She went through a really super aggressive, and practically had to be tied down to. She would lash out at people and that was. This is all prior to the pandemic, thank God, and so there were no restrictions on being able to see her, and to. Then super passive, and physically incapacitated. So, but
who dies first, Jenny or your mom?
My mom.
Okay, and this is January 2020.
Mm-hmm. And then Jenny died the day before lockdown. The first lockdown. Before the pandemic was declared. Right. And so we had planned a funeral for that week, and it had to be canceled because of the pandemic.
So you're already experiencing cumulative grief with, these losses all in a row, and then you can't even mourn the way you typically would, because you can't join your community at a funeral because of the new rules around COVID-19.
Yeah, you don't really appreciate the importance of the rituals that come with grieving, and I'm sure your sponsor
with Brad Jones, we
knows
do talk about this often, but yeah, there's a therapeutic quality to these rituals, right?
It helps you in those early stages of grief. It just certainly helps you, and it's the community you experience, and it was just so much separation. We tried like 3 times to plan the funeral, and it kept getting canceled because we had several lockdowns. We think, we're getting better, right. Boom, and it was, and then we finally said, let's just go to a graveside. Let's just go to the graveside and get this, because it's getting ridiculous now how many times we've had to cancel it.
So, Anne Marie, in a short period of time, you say goodbye to 4 loved ones, like 3 siblings and your mother. And please maybe share with us how you reacted to these significant losses in your life, and tell us about this term cumulative grief, and then what you learned about grief through this process.
Well, I learned a lot, and surprisingly, I learned even more, so much more after I left Metrolinx, and I had time
Right.
to more time to process it. And I think one of the things I do to cope, and many people do to cope, is we work. We do, and it's something I also love to do too. I really enjoy it, and I feel somewhat in control in there. And even though it's sometimes a completely out of my control environment, but I know what I'm doing, and there were lots of people surrounding me that were such good friends and supporters. So it was one of the things I did. The week after Paul died, I was scheduled to go to a wedding in Mexico for my daughter-in-law's sister who was getting married, and I was going to officiate, not legally.
Okay, I was going to ask.
I was
can you do that? Okay,
I was just going to officiate.
Right.
Officiate. And I decided I'm going to do it. It's just a week after Paul died, and I can barely... still wasn't able to start the day without, how when you lose somebody, there's this moment when you wake up where you haven't lost them. It's just this moment.
You just don't remember that they're gone.
Yeah, it's just the reality, and then it hits.
And of the 4 losses, and again, this is not to minimize any of the, all 4 hit you very hard.
They've hit me hard, and
one of those 4 is, tell me about the differences, because when I think the 4 losses, one completely out of left field, a fit, healthy young man gone so suddenly. Does that hit differently than the other 3?
They do, and yeah, they all hit differently. But Paul's was, and still to this day is somebody I miss so much, because we spent a lot of time together. We did a lot of stuff together. Even if it was, he would just send me a message saying, I heard you on the radio, Lovey. You were great. He always called everyone Lovey. I've never met anybody that had more women say they were his best friend than Paul.
Right.
And I noticed when Fred was trying to update people while we're waiting for the police to finish up. And by the way, the police were very, very kind at his house to us, and he'd say, I need to call his best friend. He said that about a dozen times, and it would be another woman friend that he had. Everyone felt like they were his best friend to him. Well, so many of us felt like that. And he weirdly that year resolved things with people. He and I, he wouldn't drive on the highway, and he and I would drive together up to see my mom every Wednesday. And he had a break in his day at school, and we would drive up to see Mom. And so we did a lot of connecting. We went to Montreal by train together. And so we had all this time that I'm very, very grateful for the year before he died. And he was resolving things that, you have friendships that break away for dumb reasons. You don't even really know the reason. And he was resolving stuff, so it's weird that I don't know if you somehow know you're going or something. Anyways, but he did, and so I really miss him, but now I'm at the point with I can remember all the things with him and not necessarily burst into tears. I can laugh and I can remember the kinds of things that we did or the things he said, and
Is it helpful, like for Paul specifically? Again, you suffered these 4 losses, bang, 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 bang. Oh my goodness gracious! But for Paul specifically, does it help to talk about him and to share stories of Paul, or does it hurt to like? Is it a feel good to talk about Paul at this point?
Oh, absolutely. If you, when you are, they won't ask you about your loved one. They don't want to say that. People don't want to say the wrong thing. So there's that. And then they often say exactly the wrong thing that you want to say. Or they would say about my sister Kathy or my sister Jenny, it's a blessing. Right. I just want to slap people when they say that. And they mean well, but there is a innate prejudice about disabled people that they're better off dead. Is that what, really?
Right.
and that they don't mean in a cruel way. They just think they're doing the right thing. If I make an excuse for this person dying, then you won't feel so bad.
Right. Oh, here's a silver lining for you, Anne Marie. On the bright side.
On the bright side, yeah. So, but to tell stories about him while he was living helps you focus on his life rather than on his tragic death and all,
Right.
But both are important to relay. The story of his death, it helps you actually incorporate it into your life and believe it more than not talking about it, because it's easy to fool your brain into that he's still here or he's still coming back. Or
I like this comment on the live stream from J-Ho, who says, it's heartbreaking to listen to stories of suffering and death, but it's important not to shy away from the subject. And I think that's why I wanted to have this chat, because everybody dies, right? And when somebody dies, typically they leave behind people who will miss them very much, who love them, who cared for them, and then will miss them very, very much. And this is in your star piece, you talk about everyone's grief and their process are unique, which is you have many siblings who have experienced the same loss as you have, and I'm going to assume that you all grieve differently. Like your grief might be different than your brothers or your sisters. Like it's unique to each individual, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve.
Yeah,
right?
It is. It's very, very individual, and one of the things it taught me is that grieving that's full of regret at the things you said or you didn't say, or the experiences you didn't have, or is a very difficult thing. It's a weight to carry, and so to love and to let yourself love completely means that someday you're going to experience grief. That's just the way it is, and what's the alternative of never experiencing love? And that's no way to live.
No way to live.
So I try to live my life loving people without regret. Thinking I should have done something, or I wish I did this, or I wish I did that.
Would you say you're still grieving these losses in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it just gets incorporated into your life, and again, I can tell stories, Jenny stories that I just love, and you'll get Facebook is really only the place I get reminded of things from, because it's been around, I think, for at least I've been on it 14 years now, so it'll come up, and
sure.
Videos of Jenny. The annual Jenny singing Amazing Grace at our Christmas parties. And
she loved Elvis, right?
And she loved Elvis, yeah. And we got some of her. She would go to the Elvis impersonator thing, because for a long time she lived in Collingwood.
Of course, yeah.
So she would go there every year and get stuff all signed by all the different Elvises. And it would just be Elvis 100 times on different signatures.
Amazing.
And yeah, she just loved things like that. Yeah,
and she loved her the Toronto sports teams.
She was a fanatic. First, the Maple Leafs would always be her first choice, and God help you if you gave her another team's jersey or something.
Right,
she would just toss it at you.
Yeah, don't give her a Bruins jersey.
I would told her on the phone one time. I sent you Tim Hortons card. How much? And I said 15, and she hung up on me. I'm like, I thought we just got connected, and I like phoned her back, and she went, hello? And I said, what'd you hang up on me for, Jen? And she said, I don't like 15, I only like 20. And I'm like, well, they only had 15, and she hung up on me.
Yeah, she thought, no bullshit there either.
No bullshit.
That's refreshing.
Okay, Jenny. Got the message.
So, Anne Marie, if somebody listened, and the reason I wanted to do this episode is because how many people listening have experienced loss? And maybe even before we get there, like the difference between, grieving and cumulative grief. Like, I'm sure you dove into this and become somewhat of a subject matter expert yourself as you process everything. But like having the 4 losses in a relatively short period of time, is there a compounding effect where it's very different than if you lost 4 people in, 5 years apart or something like that? What is cumulative grief?
It's just how it sounds. It's that you haven't really incorporated. I would say the word recover, but recovery is a lifelong process. You haven't really processed the grief, the death of someone when someone else dies, and then it gets complicated. I think it gets mushed up. I would cry some mornings and I wasn't sure who I was crying for,
right,
and or what it was about, or where did this come from, and that kind of thing. So, and I'm a crier. That's that I wear my emotions on my sleeve, always have, and I think always will. And I cry, but it would, I couldn't figure out what sometimes. Well, what is it about? Rather than I'm just feeling sad. It doesn't have to necessarily be, is this about Paul? Is this about my mother? What's this about? And then you will have moments where you go, oh, this is a story my mother would have loved to hear. And so that would make me sad because she'll never hear this story. This would be the best story. She would love to tell this story of what just happened to me to her friends at the bridge table.
Right.
And so it just gets very, very complicated, and you never get a breath to be able to really process what happened to you.
Now, FOTM Erin Davis wrote a book, Mourning Has Broken, about what she went through when she lost her daughter very suddenly. And Erin's been on this program to talk about that, and it's a very sad story. On her very first Mother's Day, Erin Davis's daughter went to sleep and never woke up.
Mm-hmm. God.
Have you considered maybe writing a book about cumulative grief, in that I think people listening would take some solace and would find some relief in reading your accounts and what you've learned through your process?
I have thought about that, and I because I am a writer, and that's one of the ways I do process things. I read Erin's book when it first came out, but it was, I forget which death had just happened. And my brain wasn't letting me absorb her pain through it at the much. And so I read it again at a different stage. And it's weird how you can pick up different things depending what's going on in your life at that point. Sometimes you're just not ready to delve into that. Well, so
I would assume that you'd be experiencing that's a form of trauma that you're experiencing, and that your body is sort of in a survival mode. It's not in a receptive mode for pro tips and life hacks, right?
And I did go through, especially you're in the pandemic. So now I kept thinking this would, we're in this pandemic, we're in lockdown. I don't see other people. I would process it. But I got into a state of something else is going to happen, because now we're in a pandemic, so everything's out of control. And
number 5 is around the corner, is what you would think.
Number 5 is around the corner. It took me a long time to stop with who else, and I got paranoid about my kids, and I got paranoid about my grandkids and what was going to go wrong, and if I didn't hear from them. I've always been a little bit that it's hard when you're a mom. It's like, and my mother was to the extreme that way. If she saw an accident and the word Toronto was in it, she was sure I was dead.
Okay, my mother, if she hears anything on the news, if she's watching CP24 or whatever, if any cyclist is hit, it's me. No matter anywhere in the GTA, if a cyclist, because I'm out every day on the streets and everything, and if a cyclist is hit in the GTA, it's me. Until proven otherwise.
That's true. I think that's what. And I'm a little more, because my mother had no idea about Toronto. When I was leaving Barrie that day, she said, "What do you do? You're never going to see a tree again." And I'm like, "I think Toronto has trees, Mom." And she goes, "Not like us, our trees."
They're different trees.
Yeah, she had no idea about Toronto. So when she just saw Toronto, it was like Barrie. So, so she, so I do that to a different extent when I hear about like a shooting and on the street that's kind of close to where my son in Toronto lives.
Right.
I do think about sending him text saying, "You're okay, right? You ain't doing anything.
Well,
what are you
there
doing?"
was a few years ago, sadly, tragically, there was like a 40-something-year-old white male who died on Royal York on his bicycle. This happened a few years ago. So everything did line up at that time. And there I can be like, let's let's get some evidence this is not Mike, because this profile matches. But if you hear now about, I don't know, in Pickering, if an 80-something-year-old woman is hit on her bike, it might be me. Just remember that, Anne Marie. Okay. So as we close off, firstly, I want to say I'm glad I finally got to meet you. And I'm always interested in hearing about your life as a spokesperson and PR professional. But I really was grateful that you came on and opened up and talked to us about the cumulative grief you experienced recently and how it affected you, and talking about your loved ones who have left us. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for being willing to talk about death. Not everybody wants to do that.
This is the home of talking about death. Okay? And no one talks more about death than this program right here, Anne Marie.
Okay, because I am, I could talk for 90 minutes about and make you laugh the whole time.
Right. That's next time.
The next time.
When you kick out the jams, we'll do that.
Okay.
But any final words? So if someone listening is experiencing grief and they might be confused by how they're reacting, or if there is a norm to how you should react, or where you can seek help, etc. Like any final thoughts you'd like to share with that listener right now?
Well, however you're feeling, if you've lost somebody, however you're feeling and however you're responding is normal. It's normal for you, and it's natural. It's a process you're going through, but keep in mind, if it's limiting your life and it's screwing up your relationships, and it's interfering in your work, and it's interfering in your ability to find joy again, then reach out. It doesn't have to be professional. It reaches out. You need to talk to people. And if the people you're closest to have trouble hearing you and listening to you, try to gently tell them in a kind way, I need to talk about my loved one. And it would be great if you gave me that opportunity.
And maybe it's good friends, maybe it's a therapist, maybe it's a support group, but whatever works for you, don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it.
Exactly. And thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Look, we're going to, sadly, your mom's not here to tell her you're going to be in front of the Toronto tree. You should be excited to know Toronto has trees, and that the Toronto tree is just outside the front door.
That's a good wrap up.
We're gonna get our photo by. I love the fact Dave Thomas named it Toronto Tree, because I thought Dave Thomas, who's a very creative writer, and he was in like a madman in marketing like before he was a SCTV guy. I'm like, I was ready for it. He's gonna give it a very creative name, and he called it Toronto Tree, and I think it's so uncreative, it's brilliant. So it's gonna stick. We're gonna add it to the FOTM lexicon.
Okay.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,413th show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm actually all over the place, but you can find me at Toronto Mike. Where should we follow you, Anne Marie?
You can find me still reluctantly on Twitter at I can't remember what. I don't think you can.
I'll tag you on this. Yeah. I will tag you, and then people can find you.
And I have moved over to Threads as well, and that's Femwriter.
I tried it, and then I logged in, I created it, and then I never went back. But I guess to each his own. But I prefer, my alternative to Twitter that I prefer is Blue Sky. But I know Threads has far more users, so I'm kind of lonely at Blue Sky.
Oh, yeah, and
that's why I miss the old Twitter. Shout out to Cam Gordon, PR professional. And FOTM Hall of Famer. Okay, so you're on you're on Threads, and you're on the app formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I am reluctant to call it X.
I don't call it X either. Much love to all who made this possible. That's Great Lakes Brewery. That's Palma Pasta. Don't leave without your lasagna, Anne Marie. That's Recycle My Electronics. That's Raymond James Canada, and Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow when my special guest is Austin Delaney. See you all then.
I play this guitar just the best that I can.